Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mountain podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In part 2 of our exploration of Ponder on This, we continue sampling from this incredible buffet of wisdom called Food for Thought. And some of these teachings we found are eerily relevant to what we're experiencing right now in this moment. So we tackle one of the most challenging statements in the collection, that the world's problems are essentially religious in nature. But, before we have a knee-jerk reaction, we unpack what that really means and how religious thinking shows up in places that you might not expect. And we also deep dive into this fundamental principle that energy follows thought, and why that matters more now than ever when so many millions of people are actively thinking and focusing their mental energy. It's a kind of conversation that starts philosophical, but quickly becomes incredibly practical for navigating the world we are actually living in. We hope you enjoy the episode. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation, it helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Back to the podcast in part 2 of Food for Thought. After our last episode of going through some food for thought, the beginning of Ponder on This, we thought we would continue down this road because we found it very interesting, useful, and applicable. This is some really, really great stuff, and it really resonates with, I think, with myself specifically. And this was the stuff that drawn me originally to the Alice Bailey teachings, was Ponder on This, but specifically these first couple sections. And I thought maybe we would kind of jump back in, but by rereading one of the last things that we covered in the last episode, because it was so it's powerful.
It is, and even before that, let's revisit the extract.
Oh yeah,
that the Master DK, the Tibetan, places in all of the books.
Mm-hmm.
Without reading the whole thing, he basically says, look, the books I've written are sent out with no claim for their acceptance. They may or may not be correct, true, or useful. It's for you to ascertain their truth by right practice and by the exercise of the intuition. Neither I nor Alice Bailey is the least interested in having them acclaimed as inspired writings or in having anyone speak of them, in parentheses, with bated breath, as being the work of one of the masters, if they present truth in such a way that it follows sequentially upon that already offered in the world teachings, if the information given raises the aspiration and the will to serve from the plane of the emotions to that of the mind, then they will have served their purpose. If the statements meet with eventual corroboration or deemed true under the test of law of correspondences, then that is well and good. But should this not be so, let not the student accept what is said. I mean, that's such a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Somebody writing something, knowing that it comes from a source of wisdom, that they are the conveyor of this timeless wisdom, basically saying, look, don't believe a word I say unless it resonates with you, because, and this is where we go back to what we've said in other podcasts, shall we? I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm asking you to discover for yourself the truth of this timeless, ageless wisdom. I can do it by conveying some insights. I can do it by reading some ancient scriptures. But in the end, the aha moment of realization has to come from us, and it only comes from us when we put it into action. And that goes back to what Agni Yoga says. I was reading a sloka, which is a paragraph, from Agni Yoga this morning, and it basically, he says, look, if anyone asks you what to do, you answer act. When you act and dare to act from an inner place, you set things in motion, you cause things to flow through, you begin to understand what things mean because you are part of the outworking of their meaning. And if you sort of decide to go on a course which is not a true course, just the fact that you've acted allows us to intervene and maybe suggest another route or give you some hints of how to course correct. We cannot do anything if you don't act. So it's basically saying it's up to us to be self-initiated on this journey of self-realization. It's not we all got to become believers. We all have to become agents of the revelation of the ageless wisdom teachings. So that's my sort of opening statement, Joey.
I mean, that really resonates. And before this podcast, we were just sort of talking about some topical things that, maybe in a different episode, we'll cover some of this stuff. But I think the root thing of each of those instances is that someone acted, right? And there's an action. And it's almost like if you're playing a board game or Dungeons and Dragons or anything, you actually have to make a move, so that everyone else can take their turn,
Exactly.
And so you're either reacting or enacting something else.
So I'd like to do exactly what you said, that we'll start with the last quote that we ended the first episode with. But before then, I'd like to bring in our dear friend Rumi. We often sprinkle our podcasts with Rumi seeds. And I think you and I appreciate that this person lived 800 years ago. A voice in the wilderness, this incredible wisdom and love and joy and light. The reason I wanted to read this particular poem, because it talks about two intellects, and it reflects exactly what the Master DK has just said in the preface to his book. So here's what Rumi said 800 years ago. There are two intellects. One is acquired from teachers and books, from repetition and sciences, granting a sense of superiority, yet the effort to sustain it becomes a great burden. It ends just as the water supply coming from outside a house stops once the source has dried up. The other intellect is God's gift. With a fountainhead in the heart of spirit, the water of knowledge bubbling from within can never become stagnant or old. Seek that fountain within yourself. Rumi.
A good friend of the show.
Yes, a good friend of the show. I think we've adopted him.
Yeah. He's our spirit animal.
Well, I think we're doing ponder on this. For me, I like to change the poet's name from a noun to a verb. We are ruminating together, not just pondering.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah,
so this is how we ended up last time, Joe, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in heaven or hell, on earth or elsewhere, can prevent the progress of the person who has awakened to the illusion, who has glimpsed the reality beyond the glamour of the astral plane, and who has heard, even if only once, the clarion call of his own soul.
Yeah, and I think of almost every tradition, religious or otherwise, that has someone that either has had an inspired vision or all it takes is one, and their life is never the same.
You can't go back. Yeah. You can't undo that. And that's what I mean, that imprinting. When you had that self-realization, it's been initiated and born inside of you. It's not a belief. It's a deep knowing because it's been born inside of you. And that's the whole point with the ageless wisdom teachings. Don't make it a religion. Make it a practice. That's why, for me, Buddhism is not a religion. It's a practice.
I'm in a kind of an interesting parallel. I've been going back and editing some old programs that we've done here, and in the Learn to Meditate with Diana Lang, she talks about how when she was a young person learning to meditate, and her teacher was telling her that like once you're on the path, you're always on the path. You can't get off it. Even if you think you're deviating, or you're always on the path once you're on the path. And I think that's the kind of thing. Once you've decided, once you've set this forward, you've had that moment, just that glimpse, you're on, this is your path now.
Well, because it's not just about you. Life has found an opening through which to reveal itself, and it's called you.
Yeah, that's the crack where the light gets in.
It certainly is. Yeah. Thank you, Leonard.
And also Rumi, too.
Right. Well, let's follow on that theme, because the next paragraph from a treatise on white magic, and remember, this is food for thought. So we've got all this, we're sort of walking around this buffet, this smorgasbord, and we're sampling. The next one says, the outcome of good is inevitable. It is, however, a question of a slow or rapid realization and liberation from the great world illusion. And to this end, every aspirant is begged to work strenuously and to lend his aid. Every person who liberates themselves, who sees clearly, and who releases themselves from the glamour of illusion aids in the great work.
Mm.
So this is every time something is liberated and we're freed from our patterns, our addictions, we do a service to the greater field because we reduce the level of darkness or lack of light. We increase the light within the collective body. So every breakthrough that we make on behalf of humanity, that's really what it's about. It's not us having a spiritual career. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to, like somebody said, well, I want to be the CEO of this. Well, I want to be a Christ, as though I will sort of tower over the rest of you. No, the whole destiny of the human family and of each human being is to give birth to the light of the truth, goodness, and beauty that lives inside each person. And that's why we're studying the ageless wisdom teachings, to help us understand how to tread that path more wisely. But we have to tread the path. It's not just sitting and reading and then parroting and repeating what we've read to others to show that we have knowledge. We have information. Knowledge and knowing comes from the application and the realization of it through a lived experience. I mean, we're going to keep sort of coming back to that all the time, Joey, because otherwise people think, well, why are you studying this? It's not study, it's food for thought. Mm. And we know that energy follows thought, and we know that thought creates everything. If we're going to create a better world, it has to start with illumined thought. Illumined thought only happens after a process of self-realization and a liberation from the illusion of the astral plane, as the Master DK repeats, throughout all his writings. Unplugging from the matrix, as we would often say. Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that before we move on?
I just find that first phrase, the outcome of good is inevitable. I feel like that's like a little, almost like a Tolkien-esque kind of thing. Like we're going to go on this big adventure and it's going to get scary, but don't worry,
Well, it goes back to hope springs eternal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I also kind of see it too as when you think about good in terms of not good or bad, but like ultimately worthwhile, is that, you're going, if you look at this place as a classroom, it's inevitable. You're going to get it eventually.
Well, when you think of good, where it comes from the Latin bene, so benevolent, if you live a benevolent life, you're living a life that is a good life. It doesn't mean good for you and its comfort. It means you are producing goodness. Yeah, you're generating goodness.
I think sometimes it is very helpful to go back and use those etymologies of the word, because sometimes in English we, as much as I love English as it takes all comers, it'll take anything you throw at it. Sometimes it helps to get a little bit of that root word in there, because we sometimes confuse. I mean, there's a good burger, there's a good tune, but the beneficial is different than good necessarily.
Benevolent really is the good of the whole.
Yeah. Okay.
The good of the whole.
And then realizing that we are the whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say, still from a treatise on white magic, in an esoteric sense, all in the future will become lighter, more rarefied, and more etherealized. So what's that about?
Well, that one, for me, really strikes an interesting, timely kind of message, because it all certainly, as we're sort of dancing with and flirting with merging with artificial intelligence, I mean, is that what that's predicting?
It's one way of looking at it. The way that it presents itself to me is that evolution And the release of light is dependent on the quickening of the vibration of the atoms. So it's about higher frequency of the atoms. And anything that vibrates at a higher frequency creates light in the end and emits light. There's light at all levels we can't see. There's a lot of light we can't see. We can't see it at the sort of below the infrared, and we can't see it above the ultraviolet.
Yeah, but that is still happening.
It's still
There's
happening.
a whole symphony of information.
So what it's pointing to is what a lot of the scriptures are saying is that at some point we will not be living in the dense physical bodies that we are in now. And that's where you get people talking about, well, it's the rapture, we're going to leave this and go to heaven. In fact, technically speaking, it's the crossing from the fourth subplane to the third subplane of the physical plane, which is from the four subplanes. The four lower planes are the dense physical, and the three upper subplanes of the physical are the etheric. So it's from our perspective. It's like we talk about the invisible worlds. To the inhabitants of these so-called invisible worlds, they're not invisible. They're invisible to us because we don't have the eyes to see them. So we have to think differently. This is specious thinking, if you like. So when you understand that we're going to be living at a new level of, rarefication or refinement, then everything's going to shift. We're going to be emitting more light. So things will be lighter. At the moment, we can't see what that is. And then we go back to Agni Yoga that says, learn to listen and see with the ears and the eyes of the heart. So we go back to this whole new refinement of consciousness is tracked and monitored and registered through the heart. And we are going to be light and become lighter and lighter. In a very crude way, a nuclear explosion where something becomes radioactive is because the life force inside that atom has been activated. It's become radioactive. It is transmitting the power from the inside to the outside. And that's what happens as we grow in consciousness. We transmit that which lives on the inside on the outside. And as we become more skilled at that, more light pours forth from us, and we become wise, we become sages, we become divinely ordinary human beings. So I think when I read this simple sentence, it's basically saying evolution means the journey into the light and the liberation from the imprisonment in matter. As we mentioned before, matter is occultly called black light. There's nothing wrong with matter. Matter itself needs to be, if you like, activated so that the light within it that is hidden at the moment that can't be seen is released. So the whole evolution as we understand it, you could say, is the evolution of light or the revelation of the true light that lives within all atoms. And the true light that lives within the heart of humanity traditionally has been called the Christos, the Christic impulse, which predates Christianity. So the light we're talking about and becoming lighter is that if you like, that wise and good, benevolent aspect of who we are will become the central radiating core, what it means to be Christed.
Yeah. When you were earlier, when you were speaking about just the different levels of like the material, does that relate to or map onto the sort of the in like the Tibetan Book of the Dead? They're talking about the different bardos and the different levels. Is that because it does come from...
that's also when you let go. You're going into because you're going to the subtle worlds. Mm-hmm. And to get there, you have to let go, right, because that which holds you back is the ballast.
Because it seems like that
your attachments.
Yeah, so things like that we're saying, like in order, you have to become lighter by releasing, so that you can even enter those.
Yeah. Not by dumping and throwing away,
right,
but redeeming.
Okay.
When you redeem something, what you're doing is you're bringing light into the darkness of that unredeemed pattern.
Mm.
You're liberating the pattern, and therefore you're releasing the light, and the light is wisdom, which is why on earth we are told that the light of wisdom is gained through the journey in the veils of pain and suffering, and then we emerge more light-filled.
Right.
It's just, as we said before, it's the pedagogical approach of this planet is out of the darkness, light is born.
Yeah. I always find it interesting how that these things kind of map onto each other because it's the same neighborhood that these teachings come from.
It is. Yeah. And all of us will go through this as we shuffle off this mortal coil.
Well, it's almost like we're each assigned this sort of pattern to solve, you know, and so you go through the life and you go through your trials, and you, whether you realize it or not, you're trying to solve this pattern, and in the end, the pattern is solved by not solving the pattern, but letting go of your attachment to this pattern, you know,
by releasing the light inside.
Yeah.
And there's this wonderful affirmation that the Tibetan asks that we do each day at 5 o'clock. And the last line of it is, may I play my part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. It's basically, may I be free from all the things that sort of wrap me around the axle, all my attachments. So I can be the life that is seeking to express itself through me.
Yeah.
Well, that was one sentence, Joey.
That sentence really moved me. I really spent quite a bit of time thinking about that. So,
and then it goes on. Hopefully, we're not rushing along too quickly for those of you listening, because we're sampling it. We don't want to get a stomach ache here. We don't want to overeat. We don't want to binge on this buffet.
Just for a second, what was the, when this was released, how did people take this? Like when this book was released, like did these concepts, like, did it strike people as like wild or crazy, or just like
when it was released? It wasn't like you have it mass released and the whole world knows about it because you can get the digital version.
Yeah,
It was for those who were already in those circles. So it made its way out like you drop a pebble in a pond, circles ripple out. So it was held. First of all, remember, a lot of this stuff, particularly Discipleship in the New Age, that the two books, they're the compilation of the letters that DK wrote to his individual disciples, their instructions. The idea of publishing them is that if we get an insight into the dialogue between a master and a student and the way that he's being coached or she's being coached as a disciple by the master, we can imagine ourselves to be in a similar situation and imagine ourselves to be coached by the soul. So I believe in the beginning, they didn't make a dent, but what they did is they introduced a whole new light of understanding into the ethers. It's like this thing where you've mentioned it before. You put a drop of coloring into a glass of water. The whole thing's colored.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I think about this podcast. Is we're putting a little drop into this giant bucket called the internet, you know. But we're just doing our little part to help be part of the conversation.
Well, that's what homeopathy is about.
Yeah.
And as I've often said, I'm a great fan of homeopathy, but I can only take it in small doses.
All right.
So, are you ready to go on, Joey?
Ready to go on.
A digestive pause, that was.
Yes.
There is never anything static in the creative process. Energy, which is flowing forth in the pulsation of the one life and its rhythmic and cyclic activity, never ending and never resting, must be somewhere utilized and must find its way in some direction, oft, and then in quote or in parentheses, when man fails in his duty with catastrophic results. It's basically saying life is this continuous stream. We go with the flow. We are part of the stream. We add to it, and we, just like if you put a rock in a stream, it'll change the course of the river. Whatever we do inside the stream of life will change the nature of the conditions around us. So, but I think the reminder here is that we are part of life. There are no bystanders. Like, life is often seen as standing on the banks of a river, looking at something. No, we are the river. History is the river. A lot of times when we look at history, it's like standing on the banks of the river, looking at this flow from the past right into the present, into the future. We're being asked to be part of the flow. But the fact is, nothing is ever static, which goes back to something we touched on in a previous podcast when we looked at stillness. Stillness is not the absence of movement. Stillness is that incredible place of poise, which we call dynamic equilibrium. It's everything is in constant motion, and yet it has in-breath and out-breath. But you're still breathing.
Yeah. I really like how what it evokes, because there's never anything static in the creative process. And I think even just when you're sleeping, of course, and you have dreams, your consciousness is taken up in a different form, and
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like you're never actually, you're never actually clocked off. You're never actually off the clock.
No, you're not.
So,
no, you're not.
Yeah.
What I love about this next sentence is it really puts paid to this whole notion, if I study, I will know. So here's what the Tibetan has to say, still in a treatise on white magic. These intriguing pieces of information, which I at times convey, and which some of the students seem to regard as of vital importance, are of far less importance than the injunction to live kindly, speak words of gentleness and of wisdom, and practice self-forgetfulness.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we're studying this, and he's basically saying, no, the point of the study is not the study. It's to help you cultivate the wisdom to live a wise and kindly life, to speak words of gentleness and of wisdom, and practice self-forgetfulness. Oh, okay.
For me, that evokes kind of a very kind of a modern kind of analogy. So I'm like, you could spend your whole life taking apart the engine in your car. You could have it all over your driveway, inspecting every little piece, or you could just close the hood and drive to the grocery store and go do your errands. It's like there's something to knowledge and there's something to self introspection, but there's also something to getting on with your day.
And the other thing you can do, which is what I love to do, is when I get in my car, I greet my car, and I visualize all of the parts of my car as one coherent whole, and it's an entity, and my car has a name. And when I'm driving to the grocery store, I'm driving in this, it's a system of lives, a system of parts. And therefore, I realize that my loving thoughts to my car, even though it's 25 years old and what people would say seen better days, and it's a lot of the wires are chewed up by the rats, it still is running beautifully because we have a love affair. And so I think it's important that when we just go about our daily business, we understand that everything is alive. It goes back to there is never anything static. Well, that's also saying everything is alive.
Yeah, I like to think about that when, especially when I'm preparing a meal, and I think about all the steps that things had to go to arrive on my counter, and just sometimes it's overwhelming to really think about all the lives. Like every person had to be born, raised, people had to change their diapers. They had to, just to get to be that one person that is in the wholesale market that said, okay, I'll take a case of those, we'll take 5 tons of those. Like everything it took to get to that person just to say those things.
And there's been, in fact, somebody's tracked that, whether it's called the history of coffee or the history of potatoes or whatever. They've looked at what gets touched in order to have this show up in your home.
Yeah. Or like, then someone hands you that Starbucks cup of coffee. What went into all around the world to bring that to that point of exchange when it goes from one hand to the other.
Imagine if we were delivering each other something else.
Yeah.
What would it take from each of us? What could we put into the field so everybody could be nourished and take a sip of this cup of kindness, for instance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's carry on. Each field of awareness in its boundaries constitute a prison. And the objective of all work of liberation is to release the consciousness and expand its field of contacts. When there are boundaries of any kind, where a field of influence is circumscribed, and where the radius of contact is limited, there you have a prison. Ponder on this statement, for it holds much of truth.
It's another section of mine that speaks to my heart.
What is it? What's it speaking to?
Well, I mean, it's the celebration of sort of the rebel thinking of like anytime that you have a box, anytime that there's, a boundary, anytime that it's almost like your duty to think outside of that boundary.
Yes. And as we said before, as long as you don't rebel against your soul,
Mm-hmm.
but you rebel or overcome the obstacles or attachments that are preventing the soul to express through you.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, as it's
Of
called.
course, yeah, absolutely.
But I love this one because it says that every time we work inside a form, it could be a physical form, it could be an emotional form, it could be a mental form that we call a belief. If that becomes our only field of reference, and if it becomes like a sealed chamber, we're in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the problem of orthodoxy, but also the beauty of orthodoxy is that it gives you something to expand on. So like that's like as much as I like say that, it speaks to sort of my rebel heart. But if you don't have anything good to rebel against, you're just out doing nothing.
Well, and that's what I've said. My experience with anarchists way back in the 60s was they just wanted to rip down. And I remember having a conversation, so that you want to break everything down so that you can rebuild what? And it was like blank stares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
They're just into ripping down.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes we forget that you need something worthy to have a foundation of our first principles to even have a tangential conversation about. You need something that's structurally tangible, even if you agree with it or not. But it'll strengthen your argument or your proposition.
Right, and in the Toyota model of continuous quality improvement, the Japanese would ask why 5 times if there was a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would make it easier. I made that into a so that when I was working in the corporate world. Yeah, let's do this so that this would happen. What will happen? What will be the outcome of that? Oh, this, and this. Well, so that. And you go down until, oh, we're really doing it because of this.
Mm. Yeah.
Then you understand the consequences of our actions at the deepest level. Okay. So this is a sampler. The next one, it says, persist. Failure never prevents success. Difficulties develop the strength of the soul. The secret of success is ever to stand steady and to be impersonal. Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
That was what I remember a very dear friend of mine saying, Michael, don't take yourself so personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, I was always kind of fond of take your work seriously, but not life seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously,
You can take life seriously, but not in a fixed, immobile way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So persistence, and this is persistence, patience, and perseverance, the 3 Ps.
Yeah. It isn't that concept of persist, because, failure never prevents success. That resonates with me.
Well, because persistence gives you an idea of one of the hallmarks of life. It endures, it continues, it is. And when something is over time, it persists.
Yeah.
Persistence is just beingness through time and space.
Yeah.
And if you like, the one note of creation that was sounded forth, it persists because creation is still happening.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a persistent note. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
As the the Sufis would say, if God stopped singing, the worlds would disappear.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we come to a quote from The Destiny of Nations. All vaunted freedom or vaunted control is but the temporary reaction of a humanity which is swept by ideas, controlled by ideals, impulsed by selfishness, impregnated by hates, and yet all the time is struggling to express the higher and better qualities and to free itself from the thraldom of ancient evil, the slavery of ancient codes, and the curse of ancient habits of thought and living. It is what is happening behind the scenes of mankind as a whole, which is of moment. It is the unfoldment of the human consciousness which counts with the hierarchy, the watchers, the guides of the race. But this whole thing of these two things are going on. We're wrestling with all the stuff that we've been wrestling with, all the serpents and all the dragons and all the demons from before, while attempting to carry out this soul-inspired destiny, which is our work, which is our part that we play in the one.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that I was just kind of talking about Genghis Khan before this, and how, you breaking these ancient codes or these ancient, the ancient habits, and like how, at the time, like, even though he may have killed, I think, a third of the population, he also made it illegal to kidnap and sell women. So it was a gradual baby step forward, so we sometimes we need a couple hundred years of distance from something to see that it moved the conversation forward a little bit.
I think what it reveals is that all of us, everyone listening, you and I, Joey, is that there are these two streams that are flowing inside of us. The streams that are still polluted from the past, and this fresh, pure stream that's flowing from spirit, from soul, and they mingle inside of us. And what we have to do, as the Buddhists would say, is to free ourselves from the wheel of rebirth, non-attachment. We have to sort of purify ourselves. And that's cleaning up the past. That's breaking the hold of the old codes over us so that we can express the hope of the future in a more, a more skillful way. And that's the struggle that goes on. Some people call it the struggle between our better angels and our demons, between the soul and its unredeemed aspects through the personality. So that's what's going on. That's what it means to be alive inside of human conditions. It means that it's the battlefield. This is the battlefield that Arjuna was on, and Krishna was the wise counselor to Krishna on the battlefield, saying, it's not about two armies killing each other. It's about you overcoming your own demons and killing their hold over you. And taking away their life. And how do you take away their life? You withdraw your energy from it. You don't kill them. When I take away my energy and my thought or my attention from something, if you like, it withers on the vine. Now, this is different from avoiding something and turning a blind eye. I'm talking about how to practice being more loving and kind and catching myself when I'm in a pattern of criticizing or being cynical, catching myself before that thought becomes fully formulated or before I even say anything. And that way I am working on removing the patterns that block the true flow of the light of my own soul. So the battlefield that Ayuna is on is the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the fourth realm. And 4 is the number that is the bridge between the lower and higher 3. 4 in the race structure is harmony through conflict. So the fourth ray is the ray of harmony through conflict. And in 2025, it's said, for the next number of thousands of years, the fourth ray is coming in to dominance. So we've got the fourth ray playing upon our planet at the moment, which is exacerbating, if you like, the conditions of conflict so that we can find harmony. And you and I have talked before, it's these two polarized points on the baseline of a triangle have to meet and merge at a higher level where they see what they have in common. When they live on the baseline of a triangle, they do battle. But when they rise together to serve a common purpose, they meet at the apex of the triangle. That's the resolution of the pairs of opposites. So being human is, how do you resolve the tension of the pairs of opposites so you can be a whole person, a synthetic person, a synthesized person? And that's the journey we're on. So all of the things we're reading point to that tussle, that struggle. Do you have anything to add there? Because the next one opens up a huge door, the next sentence.
Let's go ahead with this next one.
I love this one.
Yes.
The world problem is essentially a religious problem. And behind all strife in every department of world thought today is to be found the religious element. What does that do to you, Joey?
Well, this one could almost be its own episode. And, when I first read that, I definitely had to take a moment. And I mean, my initial reaction is, of course, obviously, that seems, I've spent my whole life in and out of religions, reacting to, coming to, but I think we can have a knee-jerk reaction to that. Or we can also look at this idea of a type of thought there's a type of thinking called religious thinking. And when I start to think of it like that, okay, so the problem is that we apply religious thinking to things where religious thinking is not the applicable thought, as if it's the only tool in our tool chest.
That's a lovely way of looking at it. And what it prompts in me is that the religion, we follow a religion because it speaks to us. It gives us a sense of meaning of life and belonging, and therefore this must be true. I sense some truth in this, therefore it's true. And therefore, if I live a religious life, I want to impart my truth on everything, rather than say, it helps me be in touch with truth. We go back to the Theosophical Society. Their main statement, their motto is, there is no religion higher than truth. And I think what this is pointing to, this particular sentence, Joey, is that anytime we codify a belief as a religious belief, it takes on, if you like, the role of being dogmatic. And we've pointed out in previous podcasts that when dogma together with emotions, unbridled emotions mix, you get fanaticism. So,
I think that's the defining difference between a religious journey and a spiritual journey.
Yes, thank you.
And so for me, like, the problem with the different various religions, and even though I found much beauty and certainly meaning and belonging in them, the exclusionary nature of it interrupted my spiritual growth.
Well, let's dive into that and go back to what we have here at Meditation Mount, the principle of essential divinity. And we've said before, it's a fact. We believe it's a fact. But it only becomes a reality for us as we live into it. And so there is a pathway that leads into a lived experience of the principle of essential divinity. And the pathway is called spiritual approach. Now, before, people will automatically assume that that's religious. What we say here, spiritual approach is any path that leads you into a deeper realization of who you are. It could be an artistic path, a philosophical path, a religious, a scientific. It's a path that leads you into a knowing of who you are not into a deeper religious belief of who you are. And I think that's where, see, we've come out of the Piscean age, which is ruled by the sixth ray, and it's one of idealism and devotion, which are wonderful attributes because they have this clear striving for something, which is, is pure. And yet, if we just have devotion to an ideal, and the ideal is a belief, and the belief is a dogma, and dogma goes into fanaticism, we end up with religious warfare, which is what we've got on the planet at the moment. It may be couched in political language, but it is religious warfare when we think of religion being what I believe to be true is right, what you believe to be true is not right.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah. Yeah, you can replace the concept of religion, or you think with anything. I mean, politics can become religion, become tribal, and then, which is why for me, like, this interrupts your spiritual journey. Because when I walk into any new faith or any new place where people are gathered, it doesn't matter what it's about. I find, there's a little bit of the spirit. There's a gram of truth in there. There's something beautiful in there. And if you realize that is dispersed across all topics and subjects and faiths and ideas, and everyone has a little grain of truth, but not all of the truth.
Well, this is the difficult thing of being human, because everything is manifested in form. And unless you understand what is being carried inside the form is a vehicle for some inner quality or inner truth. If we just associate with the forms, then we have a mighty clash of forms. We have a mighty clash of symbols. And we have religious warfare. The most difficult thing is that we are living in an age where the mind has been emphasized. We've mentioned this before. At each epoch in the journey of humanity, through all the different civilizations, eons of its existence, has focused on developing different aspects of itself. It started with landing into the physical body, anchoring the etheric physical body on Earth, and then developing the emotional body. And now we find ourselves in this particular turn of the spiral where we're developing the mind. And as we know, the mind can separate, the lower mind can separate. And therefore, when a religious belief gets anchored in lower mental stuff, it becomes separatist by nature, rather than a spiritual journey that sees that everything is part of everything. And now we're moving from the mind to a heart-based era, which is unleashing the intuition, the light of intuition. But at the moment, we're in this age of perfecting the mind, and as though we've over-perfected it, it's become dominant rather than balanced. It's not balanced. And we've often said that the way to overcome this is not to throw away the mind. The mind is an incredibly skillful tool, but to place the mind inside the heart, where it is guided by compassion and wisdom, then it will shine even more than it is now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you want to pause for thought? I mean, we've been sampling from this table, Joey.
Yeah, we have. I find that to be very true, and I just keep thinking about the push and pull of orthodoxy and the synthesis of new ideas, and how in my own life I see how at first I was rebelling against that, and then I actually sought out orthodoxy and wanted to study it and saw a great beauty in it. But then also find that it becomes a limiting factor sometimes. And it also works for some people, like it maybe the idea of being mindfully in control of every aspect of your life is too much for some people. Like with it's the idea of morality. People think we can't have morality without religion. And maybe that's true for some element of the population.
Well, I don't think you can have morality without ethics.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But they have to derive from somewhere. And people tend to appeal to authority. They want an authority. And so it works for them for the time being. But I also see that, in this moment, it's just this moment.
It's interesting, as you were talking about orthodoxy, I was thinking in politics, you talk about the progressives and the conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
Those that want to hold on to what has been, and those that want to bring in that which is destined to be in their understanding,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
often is not the true what's next to be. It's just a reaction against the old.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's corrections and overcorrections, and
Yeah.
the pendulum does tend to swing back and forth, and and we hope for that synthesis in the middle that we never seem to arrive at.
So we were talking about everything is exacerbated at the moment because of the focus we've given the mind. And in fact, this next quote
Yeah. No.
from the Food for Thought section on Ponder on This speaks to that. The great and fundamental law that, quote, energy follows thought always holds good. And one of the conditions which is inducing the present stress and strain is due to the fact that so many millions of people are beginning to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
They're putting stuff into the field.
we have all this consciousness coming online.
Yeah, but is the consciousness focused? Is it clean? Are we polluting? It's just that more and more people are thinking. Therefore, there is more people sharing the screen and painting the pixels.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I was talking about this just before we started, how there was this tsunami warning. And unlike other times in history, we immediately had across the world, people were watching this and hitting refresh and staying up on every side, including myself, watching every moment of this. And so if energy follows thought, it's like, are we collectively now affecting these events in real time rather than studying them after the fact and going through, scientific journals 2 years from now,
Yes. Now, whether we can actually stop a tsunami, but it does point to the fact that weather conditions usually are a response to human psyche. When we're living in harmony, then the weather is usually harmonious. You've got the circulation of all the different world's currents, ocean currents, and the movement of the air streams and the monsoons, and everything is in this rhythmic dance, a harmonious dance. When we place into the field our thoughts that are in opposition to the natural rhythm and flow of life, we can disrupt the order of things. And I think that's what's happening. And we don't understand the power of our thought. We don't understand that what's happening on the planet is a result of how we think. At the moment, thoughts are used to justify, for the most part, justify why I do the things I do and why you shouldn't do the things you do.
Mm-hmm.
But when thinking is about the way that we use it here at the Mount with creative meditation, let's use our focused thought and the love and the compassion of our heart to shape a new future. Then let's hold that thought so potently that it creates, if you like, a collective thought form that will build up to a point of precipitation, just like the rain cycle, the water cycle, the moisture in the clouds builds up to a point where it precipitates and it rains. We want this rain cloud of knowable things, as Patanjali talked about. We want the precipitation of a better future to happen through our focused thought, but not just intellectual thought, but loving thought. I believe we're now beginning to understand the correlation between the psychological climate of humanity and the weather on the planet. It's a bit of a stretch for some people, but for me, it's a reality.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it makes sense that we're all part of this system, and sometimes in the same way, you can think, "What does my vote count? I'm just one little drop in the bucket," or maybe, I mean, if you live in a red state and you're a blue voter, or you live in a blue state and you're a red voter, you're like, "Oh, what difference is I'm just a drop in the bucket." But we are all drops in this same bucket. We're affecting this stuff, and as with like this is saying, energy follows thought, and more of us are focused on these things. And I have to wonder, like, there's a lot of beginners, so it's messy. It's not clean at this point. But we're not going to get, it has to be messy first before we can, you have to have that lump of clay on throwing, spinning on the deck here. and you're shaping it, and you're gonna have to practice. But failure is not, and that doesn't mean you can't have
But
success.
shaping that clay,
Hmm.
it's only useful and finished when you place it in the fire.
Yeah, we talked about this.
And then
Yeah.
so that's where the whole analogy of of pottery and what it takes to create something. This is powerful stuff.
Mhm.
Do you have any other thoughts on this? I think
I find it interesting how often this concept of energy follows thought. It seems so simple. It seems, but like the more you see this pattern, and just even the fact of like, if you find yourself listening to this podcast, the energy that it took to get to that place, the energy you give into listening, because sometimes we think about, energy can just be sitting still, but if you're listening, you're not just doing nothing. And as we all collectively move into this new era, like we're being asked to release these old patterns that aren't serving us anymore, these ancient codes, these ancient habits, and to bring in and help foster and set an example for, like solve the pattern of your life that you were here to solve. And then your life becomes an instruction manual, a way forward for all of us. It's like once one of us solves that pattern, it's easier for the rest of us to solve it.
we become an exemplar,
Yeah. Yeah.
a code breaker.
Exactly. Exactly. And I really believe that once, you may seem, it may think that you're living your life in obscurity and no one understands your problems, but we are all connected. And so we are all learning from each other. And when one person solves a pattern, no matter how insignificant it may seem, now you're really solving that for everyone.
Well, that's it, because everything we do touches everything else.
Yeah.
That's the premise.
Hmm.
And when you said that, we're drops of water in a bucket, if you imagine that each of us is a drop in the ocean of life, you think, well, how significant is that? But inside every drop, there lives the ocean.
Hmm.
It's connected back again into
Hmm.
itself.
Yeah.
It's not separate. I'm only a drop in the ocean. Therefore, what do I count for? No. The fact that you're a drop in the ocean means the ocean lives inside of you as well.
Hmm. Yeah. You are
You
literally
are
the
the
ocean.
ocean.
Yeah. Hmm.
It goes back to our description of moving from being a human to becoming a Gaian. Where humans sort of live on the earth, but a Gaian understands that the whole of the earth lives inside, and we live inside the whole earth. Therefore, we don't just live on the earth. A Gaian lives as the earth.
Hmm.
And that's the whole thing of these teachings, the materials that DK has given us, is to help us live as the teachings.
Hmm. And it's almost like we're a sort of sandbox, because we do have that beginner thing where we're not going to get it right. I mean, there's a reason why people have training wheels. There's a reason why you create a sandbox. There's a reason why you use Lincoln Logs or Tinker Toys before you use a real hammer. Like there's levels to learning. So we don't, in the same way the Sorcerer's Apprentice, we don't get too much power too soon.
However, now we have a world that is so interdependent
Mhm.
that even if I think I'm doing something in my little sandbox,
Yeah.
it affects the whole
Yeah, and
planet.
I think that's what we're seeing in this, like the online discourse of, there's that thing, social media, Twitter, like these Instagram, these things aren't real life, but they are reflections, and they are the cacophony of real life. And so we have to understand that we are learning together on a bigger stage than we've ever been. We are so interconnected in ways that seem like science fiction, even at the beginning, even just 20 years ago.
Well, it's as though the one humanity has one collective mind. That doesn't mean
Mhm.
it's one think.
No.
It's one collective mind with the many aspects. Once you realize that my thought is how I am representing the whole of humanity through my thought, and when we add all these thoughts together, we get this collective understanding. I'm just thinking about the analogy of the potter, and I just want to read a poem in a moment. But is there anything?
No.
Anything that you want to add to what you just said?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we are struggling with right now, and I see this in myself as well. Is um, and this is a technique that I use, is to try to um, understand someone's premise or argument or proposition by, if I can restate it in a good faith way,
Right.
because one of the early things that I think you said is the difference between having a point of view and having a viewpoint.
Viewing point,
Yeah.
yes.
And as I started to shift my own perspective of, this is my point of view, into this is my viewing point, and realizing that there's someone that's going to be just as, equally valid on the opposite of my viewpoint. So okay, so how do I navigate this? Because I don't want to be stuck in paralysis. I don't want to be stuck in overanalyzation. I still want to be able to act.
Well, this is the whole thing when you realize you're an aspect of something
Mm-hmm.
that is holistic. So a point of view is when I see the world from one point on the sphere, and I believe that that's the only vision of the whole that exists.
Mm.
And I crystallize it into a belief, and I tell each other, this is how the world is. And somebody says, no, it isn't. And you say, yes, it is. No, it isn't. A point of view is sampling all, or the viewing point is sampling all the different points of view on the whole sphere. When they come together, you have a holistic understanding, because all the points of view, when they are combined and synthesized, become a new way of viewing through the holistic lens. It's very different, very different. And that's what we've got to get to. It's not one thinking, one mind. It's synthesis. And synthesis is not just the mixing of all the colors in a paint box. If you do that, you get this muddy, browny color. When you synthesize all the colors, you put it back through the prism, the sacred trinity of who we are, back into the white light. And the white light is the synthesis of all colors. But once we've done that synthesis, we know that in our body, that all the colors exist inside the white light. At the beginning, we don't. We have to identify with the different colors, different religions, different cultures. And then in the end, we realize they are simply expressions of the one source of light. So I go back to this thing you talked about, using clay, and this is something that came through about 10 years ago. It's called shaping the future. And that's what we do with our minds, and that's what we're being asked to do with our lives. Help to be part of the revelation of life. And the way that we look at it in time and space is shaping the future, because we always look at the ideals being alive as a promise in the future, and we have to make it happen in the now. So this is a poem called Shaping the Future. We shape the needed thought forms of a new world waiting to be born out of the stuff of dreams that live within the heart and mind of the planetary life. Like an artist takes the clay of earth and shapes it with skillful fingers on the turning potter's wheel to bring forth a form that is of use and of beauty, so on those deep levels of consciousness, we shape the substance of the planetary dream with the subtle hands of our collective imagination upon the turning wheel of time, so that new possibilities may emerge. The form, however, is not fully complete until it has danced in the fire. The potter places the newly shaped earthenware into a kiln, and only when the right temperature and duration of the firing have been reached does the form reveal its true glazed splendor and usefulness. Likewise, it is only when the forms of our creative imagination are placed in the sacrificial fire of a higher will and purpose and tested in the crucible of daily life that the work is finished and the truth, goodness, and beauty of our labor is ultimately revealed. Life takes shape through us as we open ourselves to inspired impression, register the seed ideas held within the divine dream, and then fashion them into useful forms of living through the agency of the creative mind and the loving heart. This is our destiny as artisans, to shape and reveal the promise of a brighter future by actively participating in a ritual of continuous renewal that is the hallmark of this never-ending story of creation. So that was an attempt to sort of capture this sense of we're part of this ongoing journey of the revelation of the one life in this, it is a mystery.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful mystery. And thank you for that, Michael. That's, I think, a good place to wrap this up. And it looks like we'll probably come back for some more food for thought.
We've got dessert. We've got dessert. We are due our just dessert. So
yeah, I think we're gonna test the limits of this all-you-can-eat buffet.
Exactly, and I think this is be round 3 next time.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Joey.
All right, thank you,
I am
Michael.
replete.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.